The Mice of Marzipan Bakery. Chapter 1. The Cozy Nest. Deep in the heart of the cobblestone streets of Crumbleton, a quaint little bakery stood. It was painted in cheerful pastel yellow with a white-trimmed sign that read, Marzipan Bakery. Locals adored the bakery, especially during early mornings, when the smell of warm croissants and cinnamon buns filled the air. But what the townsfolk didn't know was that under the very floorboards of this bustling bakery lived a secret family of mice. Papa Maurice, the head of the family, was a thoughtful and cautious mouse. With his slightly bent whiskers and round glasses perched on his nose, he often looked like a mouse deep in thought. Mamma Millie was the heart of their home. With her soft grey fur and ever-present apron stitched from scraps of fabric, she made sure the family always had enough to eat and a warm nest to sleep in. Their children, Max and Mia, were bundles of energy and mischief. They loved sneaking around the bakery after dark, finding crumbs of scones and bits of cheese. Baby Momo, the youngest, was still learning to walk on her tiny pink paws. She often trailed behind her siblings, clutching a scrap of cloth she used as a blanket. The mice had made a cozy home beneath the bakery. Their living room was lined with discarded matchboxes for chairs, and their kitchen had bottle caps for plates. Mamma Millie had even found an old thread spool that she turned into a table. Above all, the mice cherished their life in the bakery, where they always felt safe and well fed. Chapter 2. A Crumb Too Far. One chilly autumn evening, as the last customer left the bakery, the mice prepared for their nightly adventure. Mr. Gustav, the baker, swept the floor absent-mindedly before heading home, leaving behind the soft glow of a single lantern. It was the perfect time for the mice to gather supplies. Max and Mia were particularly excited that evening. "I bet there's a whole slice of cherry tart left on the counter," Max squeaked, his whiskers twitching with anticipation. "You always think there's a slice," Mia retorted, rolling her eyes. "It's probably just crumbs again." As Papa Maurice opened the tiny wooden door that led into the bakery, Mamma Millie called after them, "Be careful, and don't take too much. Remember, we only take what Mr. Gustav won't miss." The bakery was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Max and Mia scurried up the counter, using the grooves in the wood to climb. Sure enough, there were a few crumbs of cherry tart left on a plate, along with a small puddle of whipped cream. "See, told you there'd be some left?" Max grinned, his mouth already full of cherry filling. "Shh," Mia hissed. "We're not supposed to eat up here. Just grab the crumbs and go." But Max was too busy enjoying his find to notice the sound of soft footsteps approaching. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the counter. Mia froze, her eyes wide. From the corner of the room, a grey tabby cat leapt onto the counter with a thud. "Run!" Mia screamed, grabbing Max by the tail and pulling him off the plate. The mice darted across the counter, narrowly avoiding the cat's swiping paw. They dove into a crack in the wall just as the cat let out a frustrated hiss. Chapter 3. A New Friend. Back in their cozy nest, Max was still trembling. "I didn't know Mr. Gustav got a cat," he said, clutching his tail where Mia had yanked it. Papa Maurice sighed. "This is why we need to be careful. A single mistake could put the whole family in danger." "That cat is bad news," Mamma Millie said, wrapping her arms around baby Momo, who had started to cry. "We'll have to be extra cautious from now on." That night, as the family settled down to sleep, they heard a soft scratching noise at their door. Papa Maurice sat up, his ears twitching. "Who could that be?" he whispered. Slowly, he pushed the tiny door open to reveal a young mouse with dusty grey fur and bright, nervous eyes. The mouse was shivering and holding a small bundle tied with string. "Please," he said, his voice trembling, "I've been looking for a safe place to stay. My name is Theo." Mamma Millie quickly ushered him inside, wrapping him in a warm scrap of cloth. "You poor thing, you must be freezing. Come, sit by the candle." As Theo warmed himself, he began to explain his story. He had been living in a nearby alley, scrounging for food scraps, but the arrival of a new cat in the neighborhood had made it impossible to stay. "I've heard about your family," Theo said, looking around the cozy nest with wide eyes. "Everyone says you're the kindest mice in Crumbleton." Papa Maurice's whiskers twitched with pride. "You're welcome to stay with us, as long as you follow our rules. We only take what we need, and we never put the bakery in danger." Theo nodded eagerly. "I'll do whatever I can to help." Chapter 4. The Cat's Watchful Eye. The next few days were tense in the cozy mouse household. With the bakery's new cat, Whiskers, prowling around, Papa Maurice insisted that everyone stay inside until they could figure out how to navigate the bakery safely again. Max and Mia, however, grew restless. "I can't sit here forever," Max complained, tossing a breadcrumb back and forth between his paws. "We're mice, Max," Mia said. "We're supposed to sneak. Sitting here feels wrong." Theo, who was still adjusting to life with the family, spoke up. "Maybe we can figure out the cat's routine. If we know when Whiskers sleeps, we'll know when it's safe to explore." "That's risky," Mama Millie said, her ears twitching with concern. "What if the cat catches you?" "I'll go," Theo offered. "I'm quick and I know how to stay out of sight. I've lived near cats before." After much debate, the family agreed to let Theo scout. Late that night, when the bakery was dark and quiet, Theo slipped out of their tiny door and into the main room. The bakery was eerily still, save for the faint snores of Whiskers, who lay curled up on a flour sack near the oven. Theo crept silently, his tiny paws barely making a sound on the wooden floor. As he moved closer, he noticed something peculiar. Whiskers had a small bell on her collar. It jingled softly every time she shifted in her sleep. "That'll be useful," Theo thought to himself. He spent the next hour observing the cat's movements. Whiskers seemed to prefer napping near the warm oven during the night and patrolling the countertops just before dawn. Armed with this information, Theo returned to the nest to share his findings. Chapter 5. A Clever Plan. With Theo's insights, Papa Maurice devised a plan. "If we're careful and stick to the corners of the bakery, we can avoid the cat altogether," he said. "Theo, your sharp eyes will be invaluable. You'll be our lookout." That evening, the family ventured out for the first time since Whiskers arrived. Theo led the way, pausing every few steps to listen for the telltale jingle of the cat's bell. Max and Mia darted toward a plate of almond biscuits, gathering crumbs as quickly as they could. Mama Millie found a patch of spilled cream near the counter's edge and carefully filled a thimble to bring back to the nest. All was going smoothly until baby Momo, who had wandered off on her own, let out a tiny squeak of excitement. She had found a piece of marzipan, but in her enthusiasm, she bumped into a wooden spoon, sending it clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the bakery, and Whiskers' ears perked up. "Run!" Theo shouted, his voice sharp and urgent. The family scattered, diving into cracks and crevices as Whiskers sprang into action. Baby Momo, clutching her marzipan, froze in fear. Without thinking, Theo darted back and scooped Momo into his arms, just as Whiskers' paw swiped through the air where the baby mouse had been standing. Theo dashed toward the nest, his heart pounding, and dove inside just as Whiskers' nose pressed against the tiny door. The family held their breath as Whiskers sniffed and pawed at the entrance. After a few tense moments, the cat let out a frustrated meow and stalked away. "You were so brave, Theo," Mama Millie said, hugging him tightly. "You saved Momo." Theo blushed under his grey fur. "I just did what anyone would do." Chapter 6. The Competition. The next morning the bakery was abuzz with activity. Mr. Gustav was preparing for the annual Crumbleton baking competition, where he planned to showcase his famous marzipan cake. The mice watched from their hiding spots as the baker rolled out dough, mixed almond paste, and shaped delicate decorations. "This competition is important," Papa Maurice whispered to the family. "Mr. Gustav works so hard, and it means a lot to him. We should find a way to help." "But how?" Mia asked. "We can't exactly bake a cake." Theo's eyes lit up. "What if we made sure everything went smoothly? We could fix anything he drops or tidy up if he spills something." The family agreed. That evening, as Mr. Gustav left the bakery to fetch more supplies, the mice sprang into action. Mia climbed onto the counter to retrieve a fallen whisk, while Max rolled a small piece of dough back to its place. Mama Millie and baby Momo carefully arranged a cluster of marzipan decorations that had been knocked over, ensuring they looked perfect. Theo noticed a small tear in the parchment paper beneath the cake and quickly patched it with a tiny strip of waxed paper. By the time Mr. Gustav returned, the bakery looked as if nothing had gone wrong. He smiled to himself, unaware of the mice's efforts, and continued working late into the night. Chapter 7. A Perfect Disguise. The day of the Crumbleton baking competition arrived, and the bakery was alive with the rich aroma of marzipan and fresh pastry. Mr. Gustav carefully packed his finished cake, a towering masterpiece of layers, almonds and delicate sugar roses, into a special box. Whiskers, wearing her own little bow collar for the occasion, prowled around, watching every movement with sharp, curious eyes. From beneath the floorboards, the mice peered through the tiny cracks. "It's magnificent," Mama Millie whispered, her eyes sparkling as she gazed at the cake. "It looks too good to eat." "He's worked so hard for this," Papa Maurice said. "I wish there was something more we could do to ensure he wins." Theo, who had been quietly observing Whiskers, suddenly had an idea. "What if we went with him? We could sneak into the competition and keep an eye on things. If anything goes wrong, we'll be there to help." The family exchanged nervous glances. The idea of leaving their safe nest and entering the human world was daunting, but they trusted Theo's instincts. Chapter 8. Stowing Away. As Mr. Gustav loaded the cake box into a cart, the mice sprang into action. Using a long ribbon that had fallen to the floor, Theo and Max climbed onto the cart and squeezed into a small compartment beneath the cake box. Mia and baby Momo followed, while Mama Millie and Papa Maurice stayed behind to watch over the bakery. The ride to the competition hall was bumpy, and the mice clung to one another to avoid being jostled out of their hiding spot. When the cart finally stopped, Theo peered out through a tiny gap and saw the grand hall. It was filled with bakers, judges, and an array of stunning cakes and pastries displayed on gleaming tables. "This is it," Theo whispered. "Stay close and keep quiet." The mice carefully climbed out of the cart and found a hiding place beneath the table where Mr. Gustav's cake was displayed. From there, they could see everything, the judges inspecting the cakes, the other bakers bustling around, and, to their dismay, Whiskers prowling near the display. "She followed him here," Mia gasped. "She's probably just curious," Theo said, "but we'll need to be extra careful." Chapter 9. Chaos in the Hall. As the competition progressed, the mice watched in awe as judges sampled pastries and took notes. Mr. Gustav's marzipan cake was a clear standout, drawing admiring glances from everyone who passed by. But then disaster struck. One of the competitors, a grumpy-looking man named Mr. Blaine, had been eyeing Mr. Gustav's cake with envy. Seeing his chance, he accidentally bumped into the table, causing the edge of the marzipan cake to wobble precariously. The mice gasped. As the cake tilted, a single sugar rose toppling to the floor. Whiskers, startled by the sudden movement, darted under the table and began to paw at the fallen rose. "We have to act fast," Theo said, his voice urgent. Max and Mia raced out from their hiding spot. Max distracted Whiskers by tossing a crumpled piece of parchment paper across the floor, while Mia darted toward the fallen sugar rose. With surprising strength, she lifted the delicate decoration and carried it back to the table. Theo climbed up the tablecloth and helped Mia reattach the rose to the cake, using a dab of leftover icing. By the time the judges reached Mr. Gustav's cake, it looked as perfect as ever. The judges tasted a slice, their faces lighting up with delight. "This is exceptional," one of them declared. "The balance of flavors is perfect, and the craftsmanship is impeccable." From beneath the table, the mice cheered silently, their tiny hearts swelling with pride. Chapter 10. A Sticky Situation. As the judges moved on to other cakes, the mice allowed themselves a moment to catch their breath beneath the table. Theo, Max, and Mia huddled together, grinning at their successful repair job. "We did it," Mia whispered, her tail flicking with excitement. Theo smiled but kept his ears perked for any sign of trouble. Let's not celebrate too soon. We still need to get out of here unnoticed. Just as he said this, the mice heard a commotion near the doorway. Whiskers, having grown bored of the competition hall, had wandered over to a table filled with sticky caramel eclairs. As she jumped onto the table, her bell jingling, a tray of eclairs tipped over, sending pastries tumbling to the floor. The crowd gasped, and a few bakers rushed over to shoo the mischievous cat away. Whiskers, now with caramel stuck to her paws, bolted back toward the display tables, leaving sticky paw prints in her wake. "Oh no," Max groaned. "She's going to get icing everywhere." "Not just icing," Theo said, his voice tense. "Look at Mr. Blaine." The mice peered out from under the tablecloth and saw Mr. Blaine approaching Mr. Gustav's display. He had a smug expression on his face and a cup of coffee in his hand. "He's going to accidentally spill it on the cake," Mia whispered, horrified. Chapter 11. Teamwork saves the day. Without hesitation, the mice sprang into action. Theo led the charge, darting across the floor toward Mr. Blaine's shoes. "Mia, grab his laces," Theo instructed. Mia nodded and quickly began tugging at one of the baker's shoelaces, tying it around the leg of the table. Meanwhile, Max scampered up the side of the table and found a small jar of powdered sugar. With all his strength, he pushed the jar toward the edge, aiming for Mr. Blaine's hand. As Mr. Blaine reached the table, ready to spill his coffee, he suddenly tripped over the tied shoelaces and stumbled forward. At the same moment, the jar of powdered sugar tipped over, spilling its contents all over his face and coffee cup. "Achoo!" Mr. Blaine sneezed, the powder clouding the air around him. The distraction caused him to stumble backward, and his coffee cup fell harmlessly to the floor, far from Mr. Gustav's cake. The crowd turned to look, some stifling laughter at the sight of the powder-covered baker. Mr. Gustav, oblivious to what had just happened, glanced over and smiled. "Careful there, Mr. Blaine. These cakes are works of art." From their hiding spot, the mice couldn't help but chuckle. "That was amazing," Max whispered, still catching his breath. "Good work, everyone," Theo said, his voice steady. "But we're not out of danger yet." Chapter 12. The Sweet Victory. The judging came to an end as the head judge stood to announce the winners. The crowd grew quiet, leaning forward in anticipation. In third place for their delightful lavender macaroons, Baker Lila Trist, the judge announced. A round of polite applause filled the hall. In second place for their elegant chocolate soufflé, Baker Harriet Beaufort. As Harriet stepped forward to accept her ribbon, Theo and the mice held their breath. And in first place, for a truly extraordinary marzipan cake that captures both artistry and flavor, Mr. Gustav of Marzipan Bakery. The room erupted in applause. Mr. Gustav's face lit up with pride as he stepped forward to receive his trophy and a bouquet of flowers. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "This means so much to me. It's been a dream of mine to win this competition, and I couldn't have done it without the inspiration of my little bakery back home." Beneath the table, the mice cheered as quietly as they could. "We did it," Mia squeaked. "No," Theo corrected with a grin. "He did it. We just helped a little." As the competition wrapped up and Mr. Gustav packed up his display, the mice climbed back into the cart. Exhausted but elated, they huddled together for the ride home, their tiny hearts full of pride. Chapter 13. A Hero's Welcome. When the cart rolled to a stop outside Marzipan Bakery, the mice tumbled out of their hiding spot and scurried back through their secret door. The cozy nest buzzed with excitement as they recounted their adventure to Mamma Millie and Papa Maurice. "You should have seen it," Max said, gesturing wildly with his tiny paws. Theo tied his shoelaces to the table leg and then, bam, coffee everywhere. "And Max knocked over powdered sugar," Mia added. "Mr. Blaine didn't stand a chance." Papa Maurice chuckled, his whiskers twitching with pride. "It sounds like you all worked together beautifully. I'm glad you were there to help, Mr. Gustav." "You're heroes," Mamma Millie exclaimed, hugging each of them in turn. "And you kept our values, helping without taking credit." Baby Momo toddled over to Theo and hugged his leg. "Thank you," she squeaked. Theo blushed, feeling more at home than ever. Chapter 14. A New Challenge. The next morning the bakery was busier than ever. News of Mr. Gustav's victory had spread quickly, and customers lined up outside to get a taste of his award-winning marzipan cake. For the mice, this meant more crumbs to collect, but also more challenges. With Whiskers growing increasingly suspicious of their movements, they had to be extra careful. Theo spent his days mapping out safe routes around the bakery. He noticed that Whiskers had a habit of napping in the sunlit corner by the window during mid-morning, leaving the counters temporarily safe. "Timing is everything," Theo explained to the others during one of their planning meetings. "If we move quickly during her nap, we'll be able to gather enough food without any trouble." Mia and Max, eager to help, volunteered for the first outing. As they climbed onto the counter, they discovered a small pile of almond shavings near the cake stand. "This is perfect," Mia whispered, scooping the shavings into a tiny pouch. But just as they were about to leave, Whiskers stirred from her nap and stretched, her bell jingling softly. She yawned and began padding toward the counter. "Mia, hurry!" Max hissed, tugging at her tail. The mice scrambled back toward their hiding spot, their tiny hearts pounding as Whiskers leapt onto the counter. They barely made it back to the nest in time, collapsing in a heap of relief. "That was too close," Max panted. "We'll need to be even faster next time," Mia said, her eyes wide. Chapter 15. The Festival of Lights. As autumn deepened and the days grew shorter, Crumbleton prepared for its annual Festival of Lights. The town square was decorated with glowing lanterns, and the air was filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider. The festival was also an important event for Marzipan Bakery. Mr. Gustav planned to set up a stall to sell his famous cakes, pastries, and cookies. For the mice, this meant a chance to explore beyond the bakery and see the world outside their familiar walls. "I've never been to the square," Theo admitted, as they gathered in the nest. "It's magical," Papa Maurice said, his eyes twinkling. "But it's also crowded. You'll need to be extra cautious." The mice decided to accompany Mr. Gustav's cart to the festival, stowing away among the pastry boxes. When they arrived at the square, they were amazed by the sights and sounds. Lanterns of every color hung from strings, casting a warm glow over the cobblestone streets. Musicians played lively tunes, and children laughed as they chased each other around the stalls. Max and Mia couldn't resist exploring. They darted between tables, marveling at the different foods and trinkets on display. "Look at this," Mia whispered, pointing to a stall selling candied apples. "Humans make the most amazing things." Meanwhile, Theo stayed close to Mr. Gustav's stall, keeping a watchful eye. It wasn't long before he noticed something troubling. A group of crows perched on a nearby lamp-post, their beady eyes fixed on the pastry boxes. "Those crows are trouble," Theo muttered to himself. Sure enough, one of the crows swooped down, its claws aiming for a tray of cookies. Theo acted quickly, grabbing a small stick and waving it to scare the bird away. The crow squawked in surprise and flew back to the lamp-post. "Nice work," Max said, running up to join him. "It's not over yet," Theo said, glancing at the other crows. "We'll need to work together to protect the stall." The mice devised a plan, using scraps of ribbon and bits of paper to create small flags that they waved whenever the crows got too close. Their teamwork paid off, and Mr. Gustav's stall remained untouched by the greedy birds. As the festival drew to a close, Mr. Gustav packed up his cart with a satisfied smile. The mice, tired but happy, climbed back into their hiding spot, ready to return to their cozy nest. Chapter 16. A Narrow Escape. Back at the bakery, the mice felt a sense of accomplishment after their adventure at the Festival of Lights. Mr. Gustav had sold every last pastry, and his stall was the talk of the festival. The mice had not only protected his display, but also glimpsed a world of light, music, and bustling joy they would never forget. But the festival had left Whiskers in a foul mood. After a long day stuck in the bakery, she prowled with renewed determination to catch any movement she could. One crisp morning, Theo ventured out to check the counter for crumbs. He was careful, scanning every shadow, but Whiskers had grown wise to the mice's tricks. She leapt out from behind a jar of sugar, her sharp claws swiping at Theo. Theo darted under a rolling pin, but the cat was too quick. Just as Whiskers pounced, Max and Mia appeared. "Over here!" Max shouted, waving a strip of ribbon to distract her. Whiskers turned, giving Theo a chance to dive into the nearest crevice. Mia pulled a lever on the countertop, causing a stack of measuring cups to tumble down with a loud clatter. Startled, Whiskers jumped back, her paws skidding on spilled flour. The mice regrouped in their nest, their hearts racing. "That was too close," Mia said, her whiskers trembling. "We can't keep living like this," Max added. "Whiskers is getting smarter." Papa Maurice nodded gravely. "It's time to take action." Chapter 17. A Recipe for Peace. That evening the mice devised their most daring plan yet, to broker a truce with Whiskers. "How do you make peace with a cat?" Max asked skeptically. "With food," Mama Millie said, holding up a piece of leftover marzipan. "Even cats have their weaknesses." The family worked together to shape the marzipan into a small mouse figurine. They dipped it in a bit of cream and added a sprinkle of sugar for extra appeal. "Now comes the hard part," Theo said. The next morning the mice left the marzipan mouse in the middle of the bakery floor. They watched from a safe distance as Whiskers, curious about the unusual treat, approached. The cat sniffed the marzipan, then licked it cautiously. After a moment she lay down and began to nibble on the sugary mouse. Theo took a deep breath and stepped out of hiding. Whiskers froze, her eyes narrowing, but Theo held up his paws in a gesture of peace. "We don't mean any harm," he said softly. "We just want to share this space with you." Whiskers tilted her head as if considering his words. Then, to the mice's astonishment, she purred. Chapter 18. Harmony in the Bakery. From that day forward, the mice and Whiskers lived in an uneasy but respectful truce. The cat, satisfied with her daily treats of marzipan or cream, no longer hunted the mice. In return, the mice stayed out of her napping spots and made sure to leave no trace of their activities. With peace restored, the mice found new ways to help Mr. Gustav. They polished his mixing bowls, tidied up spills, and even helped arrange decorations on his cakes. Mr. Gustav, though unaware of his tiny helpers, noticed that his bakery seemed more efficient than ever. One evening, as the mice gathered for a meal of crumbs and cream, Papa Maurice raised his thimble of cider. "To our family," he said, "and to a bakery that feels like home." The mice cheered, their voices tiny but full of warmth. Epilogue. The sweetest reward. As winter settled over Crumbleton, the bakery became a haven of warmth and cheer. Customers flocked to Marzipan Bakery, eager for a taste of Mr. Gustav's creations. One snowy morning, a delivery arrived, a golden plaque inscribed with the words, "Crumbleton's Finest Bakery." Mr. Gustav beamed as he hung it on the wall. From their hidden perch, the mice watched with pride. They knew they had played a part in this success, even if their contributions would forever remain a secret. In the days that followed, the mice continued their quiet work, finding joy in every crumb, every daring adventure, and every moment spent together. For Theo, Max, Mia, baby Momo, and the rest of the family, life in the bakery wasn't just about survival. It was about making every day as sweet as marzipan. And as the snow fell softly outside, the mice nestled in their cozy nest, dreaming of the adventures yet to come.